Looks like a bombshell recording just dropped, exposing who really got Scott LaRock, and all fingers are pointing at his own bodyguard. The street's been talking for 37 years, but now we might finally have proof that Darryl RoboCop set up one of hip-hop's greatest legends. We're talking about evidence that could rewrite hip-hop history and expose one of the culture's most tragic betrayals. KRS-One hasn't responded yet, but OGs from the golden era are already speaking out. And man, there's mad layers to this story. So grab something to drink and let's get into it. Let's break down what just surfaced. An anonymous tape leaked online where a former Bronx hustler claims he witnessed RoboCop plotting against Scott LaRock hours before the fatal shooting on August 27, 1987. The man on the recording says RoboCop had been skimming money from BDP and was scared Scott was about to find out. So what happened that night? D-Nice, who was just 15 at the time and part of Boogie Down Productions, got caught slipping in the High Bridge section of the Bronx. Some local dudes surrounded him. One pulled a gun on him, and D-Nice panicked and called Scott for help. Now, here's where it gets real suspicious. RoboCop jumps in mad quick like he'd been waiting for this moment. "We gonna go up there, and I'm gonna go get D-Nice," he tells everybody. Scott, being loyal to the end, wasn't about to let his bodyguard roll out solo. He says he's going to come with him, not knowing that decision was gonna be his last. What nobody knew at the time was that RoboCop allegedly had already made a call to some goons in that neighborhood, setting the whole thing up. And the leaked audio suggests RoboCop told these dudes exactly when and where they'd be pulling up. But to understand why this betrayal is so wild, we gotta rewind and look at who Scott LaRock really was and how he changed the game. The year is 1984. Scott Sterling just rolled back to New York with a college degree in his pocket, something that's pretty rare in the hip-hop scene. And while most DJs were hustling on corners trying to make a name, Scott took a different route and landed a job as a social worker at the Franklin Armory men's shelter in the Bronx. One day, Scott's working his shift when he sees this homeless kid named Lawrence Parker running a slick hustle. Now, Scott was supposed to give out subway tokens to shelter residents for job interviews, but this Parker kid was stacking them up to hit the clubs instead. Scott caught him red-handed and threw him out the shelter with the quickness. Few months pass by, and Scott's chilling at his boy Said G's spot when guess who walks in? The same homeless kid he kicked out. But instead of more drama, they got to talking about music. Scott was nice on the turntables, and this Parker kid, who was calling himself KRS-One by now, had bars for days. Scott invited KRS to come check him DJ at the Broadway Repertoire Theater. KRS still remembers walking in that night. "My mind got blown clean out my head just seeing Scott DJing, and then watching Mantronix walk by, and then Dougie Fresh in the corner grabbing a drink. Was just too much for me." By 1985, these two unlikely partners formed Boogie Down Productions. Scott brought in this 15-year-old kid named D-Nice who was related to one of the shelter security guards. So Scott was basically mapping out their whole future. And then, in early 1987, they dropped Criminal Minded with this iconic cover. Scott and KRS posed up with and straps looking like revolutionary Black Panthers. This album went crazy, moving close to 300K units, and got Warner Brothers waving a $275,000 check their way by August. Life was pretty sweet. Scott and KRS were about to hit Madison Square Garden with Public Enemy and LL Cool J to announce their major label deal, and BDP was on the verge of becoming hip-hop royalty. Then came August 26, 1987, the day everything fell apart. Scott's celebrating their latest deal at McDonald's with KRS, Just Ice, their manager Scotty Morris, and their bodyguard Darryl RoboCop. The mood is all champagne dreams when suddenly, D-Nice calls in a panic. The kid's surrounded by hostiles in High Bridge, and one dude's got a gun to his face. Now check this. This right here is where gets real suspicious. When D-Nice hit him up all scared, RoboCop jumps in mad quick, like he'd been waiting for this moment. "We gonna go up there, and I'm gonna go get D-Nice," he tells everybody. Now, Scott, being loyal to the end, wasn't about to let his bodyguard roll out solo. "I'm gonna go with you," he says, not knowing that decision was gonna be his last. But first, Scott makes this smart move. He calls Chris Lighty and the Violators crew for backup. The squads link up in the South Bronx, and then push to University Avenue between 165th and 166th Streets. The scene is tense. The dude who pressed D-Nice isn't there, but his people are holding down the block. Instead of keeping it cool, RoboCop goes full aggro, pressing these dudes about where their boy's at. And when words get heated, RoboCop slams one of the younger cats onto the pavement. Scott steps in and calms everything down, but as he's walking back to the whip thinking crisis averted, shots start ringing out from everywhere. RoboCop's story went like this. We were driving, and all of a sudden Scott grabbed his neck and fell down. His head hit the motherfucking dashboard, and you see a hole, and it was a 22. Called it some miracle shot from 20 stories up. Now, for those of you who don't know, them Webster projects ain't no joke. So RoboCop trying to tell everybody some shooter was posted all the way up on the roof with a little .22 caliber pistol. Not a rifle, not a 9, but a tiny .22 that most shooters wouldn't even respect for anything beyond close range. OGs from the block been saying for years, ain't no way that shot was random. Somebody would have had to know exactly when Scott's car was pulling up, exactly where it would park, and exactly which window Scott would be sitting by. That ain't coincidence, that smells more like coordination. And RoboCop's the one who parked the car. The one who escalated with the locals when Scott was trying to keep peace. The one who came out without a scratch, while his boss caught the perfect headshot from an impossible distance with the weakest gun in the streets. But let's get back to the story. They rushed Scott to Lincoln Hospital, but doctors couldn't save him. And by 2 a.m., he was brain dead. His mother held off taking him off life support until 5 p.m. the next day, so all his people could say their goodbyes. MC Search broke down when he saw his friend. He was laid out like Jesus on the cross. Both eyes were partially opened, and he had tears streaming down his face. I grabbed his hand, told him how much he meant to me, and he had a nervous reaction, like he was grabbing my hand. I lost it. I started bawling. August 27, 1987. Scott LaRock was gone at just 25 years old. Hip-hop lost one of its legends before he could fully build his masterpiece. And the aftermath of this was just as brutal. Warner Brothers pulled their deal. KRS blamed D-Nice for making that call from the hood. Their brotherhood was shattered. Almost a year later, police arrested 2 teens for Scott's murder, but they walked free in '89 when no witnesses would testify. For 37 years, that's where the story ended. Until now. This leaked audio that just hit the streets tells a whole different story. The tape suggests RoboCop had been skimming money from BDP and knew Scott was about to catch him. So he set up the perfect hit, used D-Nice's situation as bait, deliberately parked their car in the line of fire, then created a distraction so the shooter could take his shot. If this audio is legit, we're talking about one of the coldest betrayals in hip-hop history. OGs from the Bronx are coming out the woodwork saying they always suspected RoboCop, but never had proof till now. And the questions still hanging in the air are super heavy. Why would RoboCop escalate a situation Scott was trying to defuse? How did a shooter make a perfect headshot from 20 stories up with a small caliber pistol? Why did RoboCop park their car with clear sightlines from the projects? And why did every witness suddenly go silent when police caught suspects? What makes this case even wilder is most of the players still breathing. RoboCop reportedly living down in Atlanta these days, still working security for other artists. Plus, D-Nice and KRS-One supposedly talking again for the first time in years since this evidence surfaced. After nearly 4 decades, Scott LaRock might finally get the justice he deserves. But for hip-hop, the damage is already done. We lost a visionary who could have changed the game even more than he already had. Drop your thoughts below on whether you think RoboCop set up Scott LaRock, or if this is just somebody trying to make noise with false accusations. Don't forget to smash that like button and hit subscribe for more hip-hop history exposed, and tap that notification bell to stay locked in on all the latest developments in this wild situation.